Welcome back, everybody, to round 4 of the Arcane Series cEDH tournament. This is going to be an interesting pod with 3 Kinnan players. Kinnan is seeing quite the showing today, and a Sissay. We've seen several Sissay decks today too. Kinnan and Sissay very, very popular in today's tournament. We appreciate everyone being here and hanging through us with us. Make sure that you check us out on all the social media networks that you see on your screen. We are Combat Step MTG on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. And we're just Combat Step on YouTube, Twitter, X, and Twitch. Be sure to give us a follow. We release content on our YouTube channel every single week. So if you're subscribed, you won't miss out on any of that. And if you follow us on Twitch, you will see all the streams that we do each and every week. And then we take those streams and download them, clean them up, and put them onto our YouTube channel. Mulligans are underway here, and you can see some of our anti-cheating measures put in place or live in action. Players are doing their Brazilian cut, where they separate their decks into 3 piles after they shuffle, having the players choose the order. And then additionally, to prevent deck stacking, they have to have a player choose a number between 9 and 21. And at that point, whatever number is chosen, that many cards will then be taken off the top of the library and go on the bottom to try to prevent deck stacking. And that is so that players can have a great time. The integrity of the event can be held up. Kinnan has had quite the show, and we haven't seen Kinnan do super well today. We've seen several Kinnans get close to doing things and then be interrupted. So this will be interesting today if Kinnan in this pod can pull it off. Which Kinnan deck is going to be the one that pulls it off? Is this just going to be really terrible for the table because the Kinnan players are going to play up against each other and be able to do things like Phyrexian Metamorph or Mirage Mirror, some of the combo pieces that each other have? That's going to have to be some very thoughtful, skillful plays from the Kinnan players, because if they are not in a position to go off, they're not going to want to set up the other Kinnan players to go off inadvertently. And that can happen, especially with things like Born Upon the Wind. Not sure if any of these Kinnan decks are on that. However, if they are, this could be a very, very interesting pod. We also know that Sissay typically runs Kinnan inside of it, and that can be very powerful too. This is going to be a game where it's either going to be very, very quick, or it's going to be more on the mid-rangier side of things, and it's going to come down to who can hold out the resources the longest, fight through the interaction the hardest, and close it out. Playing in these online tournaments is a great way to still have fun and play cEDH, especially if you have nothing better to do on the weekend. It's a great time to get in some extra practice. If your LGS is like mine and you don't have an active crowd, or it's like mine and you have to travel quite a distance to participate, this is a great way to do that from the comfort of your home. A lot of the online tournament organizers have really stepped it up and enhanced their anti-cheating measures to really squash out those bad actors in our community and really put a stop to it. Nothing is ever perfect. Even in-person cheating is a thing. People will always be tempted by greed and attempt to do that. However, in our online tournaments, we really do everything in our power to make sure that those things are not happening and our players are having a safe time at these events and a fun time at these events as well. Mulligan's still underway here. A lot of decisions he made. Hands you might normally consider keeping, maybe are not going to want to keep, knowing there are other Kinnan players sitting right across from you. Decisions are everything in this pod. The wrong decision is could lead to the wrong player just having an absolute huge amount of advantage. So far, turn 1 is just leading into everybody playing some lands, nobody wanting to go too crazy. We also have an ignoble hierarch being deployed over here by the Sissay player. Ignoble is not such a terrible play. Pretty good for the Sissay player, giving them a little bit of an advantage with a mana dork. We are seeing a Manglehorn hit the field, which is going to slow down the other Kinnan players as well as the Sissay player too. Not a terrible play there on seat number 3 rather, slowing down the other players. Continue to make this game more and more mid-range and just more of a grind to the end is where this game is going to end here. We are seeing seat number 1 deploy a Sylvan Library, another good slow game action here if you're trying to take this into more of a mid-range, slowly draw into pieces, manipulate the top deck a little bit, get the pieces they need. This is definitely a game you don't want to be super aggressive if you're not confident and have backup, or your aggressive plays may lead to you being heavily blown out here. We are seeing a Lotho hit the field from the Sissay player, another good piece to have on the field for more of a long game, more mid-rangey type of play here. Seat number 3's turn is off to another land being deployed. They're going to go ahead and fetch with it, getting another land out of their deck. Again, nothing super aggressive happening right now. And we are seeing a Thrasios hit the field, and then it looks like we're going to Thrasios Passios on over to seat number 4, yet the other Kinnan player in this pod. And it looks like they're deploying an Arcane Signet and passing the turn on over. We're going to see if we're going to take 8 and feel great, or if we're going to put some cards back and be happy with what's left. And it looks like we're debating on that 8. And we maybe end up feeling great from this. And then they took the 8, which early game like this, especially when you know that you're not likely to be attacked by other Kinnan players, typically Kinnan decks don't go for early game swinging. Taking the 8 early game and trying to get some card advantage and doing some digging is probably one of the good things that you could do right now that isn't going to drastically hurt you. They are going to deploy their own Kinnan here, try to get Kinnan out on the battlefield. They don't have a ton of mana rocks right now, or even mana dorks. So right now, Kinnan's not super advantageous for them, but at least it's out of their command zone. And then they're shipping the turn on over to Sissay. We are seeing an attack over there from Sissay. They're going to swing in with their Lotho at the seat number 4 Kinnan player, trying to get in that little bit of damage while you can. Not that it's super relevant right now, but every little bit will help. Then they're going to follow that up with their own commander, the Sissay being deployed. That is the secret layer Sissay. I believe that's the right-handed secret layer Sissay, the one that was meant to be a joke, and everything's off a little bit on it. But that is a cool printing of Sissay there from the secret layer. I believe that is the right-handed edition. We are going to attempt to Force of Negation. Ooh, maybe not. Looks like we may take that back. Some discussion around the table about what to do, and the result is that that's not going to happen. We are seeing seat 3 deploy their Kinnan, which is a good place to be, as they also have their Thrasios out and some mana to be able to either do the Thrasios thing next turn, or let's also remember that we are able to also pull off some Kinnan flips. And here we have seat number 1, Kinnan dropping the Basalt Monolith. Basalt Monolith typically does go infinite there with Kinnan. That would generate infinite colorless. All they need is some out for it, some way to turn that colorless into colored mana, as notably they don't have the colored mana to just do the Kinnan activations. do they have some sort of filter in the deck here, or is this going to be countered and that's just going to be the end of the game? Table is discussing whether or not this is going to resolve. If this resolves and they have some way to filter that mana, it is going to likely be the end of this game here with a Kinnan player just going off for it very quickly, as Kinnan tends to do. We're going to try to activate Thrasos in response, see what we get. And they are revealing a Mox Amber, which is not going to do it here. Great card for them to have in their hand with their Kinnan, but if they don't see another turn to play, it is not going to matter. And it looks like we do pass on that, though. And Kinnan is going to sit in a position where if they are able to untap, they're able to do some very powerful things. Playing some lands from the Sissay player, deploying some of their lands. Nothing too crazy from them just yet, but we do have two Kinnan players that are sitting in a great spot. If seat number 3, if that Kinnan player is able to drop any way of cloning that Basalt Monolith, that is going to be very backbreaking. You really don't want to just leave a Basalt Monolith, run a Basalt Monolith into 3 other Kinnan players and not have a way to win, knowing that Kinnan typically plays at least 1 or 2 clones. If they also play the Mirage Mirror, they can copy it that way. That was a very risky turn from seat 1 over there, and leaving that out in the field and hoping it makes it back to your turn when you don't have any other mana rocks. You did not deploy a filter of any kind. I am curious what is in their hand and what their next turn looks like. As a fellow Kinnan player, that is definitely not something you want to say is, hey, I have my combo on board. All I need is 1 more piece. Come at me, bro, because people will. There we go. Sissay deploying their own Kinnan. Now there are technically 4 Kinnans on the field. This is definitely an interesting game to be had here. Table is pondering for a minute. Looks like seat number 4 is debating on whether or not that may resolve from them if they have any sort of interaction. And we are passing the turn over to seat number 3, who is rolling for their crypt. They are lucky. The odds are in their favor. They don't take the damage from Mana Crypt. Drawing their card for turn. Do they have any way of cloning that Basalt Monolith and ending the game? They are deploying their Mox Amber, which we knew they had when they attempted to activate their Thrasos in response, giving them a little bit more advantage with mana here, giving them the ability to activate their Kinnan or activate their Thrasos and Passios. A lot of thinking to be done here. The wrong move can definitely impact the game here, and that can certainly turn the tide on whether or not you are in a game-winning position or a game-losing position here. Very careful calculations from Kinnan player. We go ahead and deploying a Llanowar Elf, some more mana. They are in a great place mana-wise. They have lots of resources available. They just need to get to their pieces. Slow and steady is the one that wins the race here, as we have 3 Kinnan players, 2 of which are set up in a pretty good place. Our Sissay player is also in a pretty decent spot to be had here. If you're passing it on over to our seat number 4, playing the Gemstone Caverns as their land for turn, they're not in too bad of a spot either. It doesn't take much for them to start activating Kinnan once they've got the mana and all of a sudden come out from behind, especially if they rip into things like the Nyx Bloom Ancient or they rip into a Seedborn Muse. appears to be some sort of discussion around that basalt monolith there. There may be some discussion around removing it, or there may be some discussion around possibly cloning it. All that takes is Kinnan to clone it. If they've got the resources, then they win. And we are passing it on to seat number 1. They are untapping. They're drawing some cards. This is absolutely a situation where they're in where you are likely to take that 8 and feel great. The life right now, it doesn't matter. You want to do as much digging as possible, knowing that you have the basalt monolith and Kinnan on the field. You just need one more piece, one more way of making some mana, or one of the filter abilities. Playing a Land of Return, which is not bad. A Yavimaya Coast looks like here. And then they're going to drop a Llanowar Elves. Every little bit of mana for them is going to be helpful. And thanks to that Manglehorn, we are seeing their mana rock come in. So that Simic Signet coming in tap does set them back just a little bit. We definitely want to slow down other players, and Manglehorn is a great piece for doing that. Buys everybody else a turn of hopefully having to slow it down, not dump their hand of mana rocks. Some heavy thinking is going on here from the players at the table. Not sure what they're questioning, if they're questioning the resolution of the Simic Signet here. And we are passing the turn on over to Sissay. Looks like there may be a response in their upkeep from one of the Kinnan players. There is some thinking or some conversation happening at the table from the players on the Sissay player's turn. And now it looks like we're potentially getting ready to go to combat here, do some attacking while we can get in where we can get in with our Sissay. It looks like we've got a Kinnan activation here from seat number 3. Do they reveal a big old nasty creature, or do they whiff here? Looks like they're revealing a Birds of Paradise. Not the best, not the worst. Additional mana in Kinnan is always a good thing. And then they're going to go to their untap here, continue to their turn with lots of buku mana here. Looks like they're going to do another activation before they do their draw step to try to see what advantage they could get here. Maybe we got a little rewind. They're not going to do that. They're going to go ahead and let that resolve roll for Crypt. Be safe from it, and they're going to draw into their card for the turn. If you're in seat 3's position here, you're just asking yourself, how can I play it safe enough? And how can I slowly advance my own board state and let the others just do their thing? And hopefully they're able to close it out using the resources they have. Having that Manglehorn on their side does not hurt them, but is going to slow down their opponents, which is very notable. We are still thinking we got a Hullbreaker War here from seat number 3, which is very powerful. If they're able to deploy anything and start that chain, they have the ability with the Mana Crypt and the Mox Amber to make infinite mana here. They just need something to start the chain. There's a Lotus Petal for you that can begin the chain. If they choose to target one of their own 0 drops, they have enough 0 drops to make infinite mana. If they then choose, they have enough to bounce everybody's permanent, non-land permanents, or counter spells as well. Table is definitely thinking hard on this, whether or not they want that Lotus Petal to resolve. There are 3 cards left in their hand, but what are the odds that they have the interaction needed to protect themselves? Table is definitely debating this. You see some hand gestures of the players talking back and forth, trying to decide whether or not there's anything that they can do here. Looks like Sissay might attempt to do a Kinnan activation, see if there's anything useful. Or are they floating some mana here? This is a great position to be in for the Kinnan player. Even if the Hullbreaker doesn't make it, this is not going to be game over for them. If they are not able to close it out here, they still have a chance. This is a great scenario to be in for them. We are still doing some debating. Sissay looks like they're going to try to do something here to either help or to stop what is happening and at least buy themselves one more turn. And now it looks like Kinnan is demonstrating the loop with bouncing their Mox Amber with their Hullbreaker Horror. It appears to be what they are targeting. This may just be a discussion of explain the loop and show us the path to victory here if the table really has no answers. This is quite the discussion from this table here over a game-winning action. I have yet to see anybody actually present interaction that is going to stop this loop. Just a lot of talk back and forth. Potential for interaction here if Sissay pulls the trigger. Not sure what the debate is right now, if they're debating on pulling the trigger now or waiting to another moment. But this is certainly a long debate over whether or not we interact. And this is where you have to consider as a commander player, the moment that you interact is very key. If you interact too late in a sequence of events, you end up possibly losing the game yourself because the part that you should have interacted with that would have stopped the other player has passed. And that could be what the debate is right now, is exactly when do we interact? When does Sissay grab something that stops this? Because at some point it will be too late to interact with. And if you miss that moment, that small window that you have in time to stop this, then it is game over. There is a lot of discussion happening at this table. This right here, folks, is an example of commander players really begging for their lives. However, this is also a downside of the game where there's so much interaction. If you have the trigger and you're going to pull it, luckily there's plenty of time left in this round. So the talking points might be appropriate, but at some point politicking is actually a problem in the game and is part of a punishable offense in the IPG if there's too much going on and it's not actually presenting any real interaction. There is certainly a lot of debate over that right now. You can see the players discussing who's interacting and pointing at each other, pointing at things. But at some point, either they're going to need to pull the trigger or they're going to need to move on and either accept that they are not interacting or they are missing their window to interact. You also can be mindful in tournaments that you can call a judge over at any point that you need them. You could call the judge in this moment to supervise the conversation, and a judge can also be called to move the conversation along when players are begging for their lives or pleading for certain things that happen and it is taking too long of a period, you absolutely have the right to call a judge and ask a judge to monitor the conversation and make sure that it is moving along in a productive manner. It looks like we bounced the basalt monolith with one of the Hullbreaker horror triggers and we passed the turn. Notably, if that is redeployed, as long as that Manglehorn is there, it will be redeployed and it will enter the battlefield tapped, which is going to cause them to use a lot of resources to be able to start the loop if they have a way of doing so. To me, I don't know that I would have necessarily bounced the Basalt Monolith if I had my own chain of in hand where I could have made infinite mana. With infinite mana and with Thrasios, surely they would have found a way to win the game. I don't know what the discussion was that took place that led to them ultimately choosing to bounce a Basalt Monolith. We will see if that was a mistake or not, as either they will get another turn or they won't, and they may or may not have a chance to then pull the loop off. As a fellow Kinnan player, someone else having a combo on the field doesn't usually matter. If you have the combo and the win yourself, you just don't worry about it. You don't let them get another untap. Looks like we are back up to seat number one's position here. We have made it 2 players now past a potential win from seat number 3. We do have some misplays that happened. We were called down to the pod. Apparently, the seat 3 Kinnan played an endurance and picked up their wooded foothills, their graveyard. They shuffled it in. The fix for that is they do pull out the card that is known, and then they shuffle their library since the rest of it was unknown, and that does result in a warning. Luckily, it is just a warning, but repeated patterns of those behaviors could lead to upgrades in their offenses. But for now, it was a mistake that does lead to them getting a warning, a game rules. We are seeing seat number 1 here start to tap and start to redeploy things, and they're deploying a Seedborn Muse, which is going to be very powerful for them given the amount of mana they have. That's going to allow some Kinnan activations on each player's turn. Even if they do not win, that is going to take some significant advantage. Looks like we are fighting over that Seedborn now. We have a mana drain and we have a Swan Song trying to fight over that Seedborn Muse. Yet another threat from a Kinnan player. Just like the Hullbreaker Horror is pretty nasty, Seedborn is just as nasty. When it makes it back to their turn, the board could be a very different place. We know that they have a Basalt Monolith in their hand. All they are missing is just one other piece to go off. And with the Seedborn Muse, if they are able to rip a Thrasios, the next turn they just deploy and win. And we are seeing Sissay. It looks like they're deploying their Teferi here. Teferi is a very good move on their part that would stop the interaction. Not sure if they're able to go for the win here, but a Teferi, while that does stop the interaction on their part, if they are not going for the win, that also may lock in a win for one of the Kinnan players, as people are not going to be able to interact with that either. Still quite the game happening here with our Sissay player and with our Kinnan player. Kinnan Seat 1 Kinnan also got a Jenga Taxes, which is just nasty for us. That is a card that some Kinnan decks have stopped playing and fell out of flavor for playing. And that card is definitely a powerhouse of a card in Kinnan. One of the few decks that can run it. We are on to seat number 3 Kinnan's turn here, and they are continuing to be a force to be reckoned with. They have several pieces that they may need. They just need a way to start the loop. Looks like they have 3 cards in hand. If one of those 3 cards can get that loop going, the only question is whether or not they have any protection. Now, it looks like we may be discussing here the bouncing of the Mox Amber, and we are winning. The Teferi on the field did stop the other players from possibly interacting. And if we have the loop with the Mox Amber and the Mana Crypt, the only one that could have interacted may have been Sissay. And it looks like they just picked up their deck and they are conceding to the win here. The other 2 players, the only thing that maybe they could have done here would have been a Beseiju to try to blow up something. And just like that, that is game here for this pod. If you have not followed us on our social media, please do so. All of our social media can be found at Combat Step MTG if you are on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Otherwise, we are Combat Step on YouTube, Twitter, X, and Twitch. We also have monthly cEDH tournaments, and we highly recommend that you attend them if you're able to. We will be back for round 5 in just a little bit. This is a great opportunity for you to watch some of our YouTube content and check out some of the things that we have going on our channel. Round 5 of the Arcane series will be coming up shortly, and then after that, we go to the top 4 players.